Father Victor.
Hello, Lenочка.
Thank you for being here for me.
This is where I often come.
Today I'm going to be asking you questions about the icon over here. Can I ask you some?
Sure, of course. I'd be happy to try to answer.
So, I want to ask where is it from and where on earth do they make them?
Well, the icon is called the Kursk root icon. Kursk is a city in southern Russia. It still exists, the city. Actually, it's a rather large town. And the icon is also called the root icon, the Kursk root, because sometime about 700 and almost 50 years ago, this icon, not this icon, this is a new icon, but it's a copy of the original Kursk icon. This is what the original looks like, except the original is underneath this encasing. This is a beautiful jeweled case which they put over the icon. And just for safekeeping, and also because people so loved this icon that they would give money to decorate it. But the icon was found 750 years ago at the root of a tree. No one knows where it came from. And the icon that was found was actually this center portion in the middle of the icon. Everything else here around the icon, which I will explain a little bit later, was added later. So the icon was found at the root of a tree by a monk who built a little house, chapel, near where the icon was found. And he prayed before this icon, which he kept in the chapel, all the time, every day. And then one day, 750 years ago, when the Tartars, who were a nomadic people from the east, invaded Russia. They were not Christians, and they burned down a lot of the towns, a lot of the churches. And when they came to this place where the icon was and the monk was, they wanted to burn down the church. And whatever they did to burn the church, the chapel, where the icon was housed, nothing happened. The church would not catch fire. And the invaders asked the monk, what's happening? Are you a magician? Are you not allowing the chapel to be burned? And he said, not at all. It's probably the grace of the Mother of God which is preventing the church from being destroyed. So the invaders, the Tartars, got angry. They went into the chapel, took the icon, and one of the invaders took his axe and hit the icon with the axe. The icon was broken into two, and they threw the icon into the forest and took the monk as a slave. The monk was very, of course, saddened by what had happened. First, his chapel was burned down. The beautiful, miraculous little icon was destroyed, as he thought, and he was taken prisoner, made a slave. Years later, the Russian nobles were going to the place where the invaders set up their city or capital to pay tribute, to pay their taxes. Okay? The Tartars, the invaders, would leave them alone as long as they paid them their tribute. You understand what tribute is? Like taxes, all right? And on the way to where they were going, they heard religious songs being sung in their own language, in Russian. And they asked about where these songs are coming from. And it was explained to them that this is a monk who was taken prisoner, and the nobleman, the Russian nobleman, paid for his freedom. So the monk went back to where he lived before he was taken prisoner and prayed to the Mother of God, hoping for a normal life. And suddenly he found both halves of the icon in the forest. And he was so happy. He took both of these icons, both of these pieces of the icon that were split into two, he put them together, and he began praying before this icon. And when he woke up, the icon grew back together again. And on the original icon here, the Kursk icon, if you take the cover off and you look carefully at the middle of this icon, which is the original icon, you will still see the scar from the axe. All right? So the icon is from Kursk, and it's called the root icon because it was found at the root of a tree. In Russian we call it the Kurska коренная икона, Kursk root.
So that was an unimaginable, magical story, and I now got so much in mind. Why do we kiss the icon? Where is the best place we should kiss it?
Well, this icon has played a very important role in the history of Russia. It is possibly the oldest miraculous icon of the Mother of God in the Russian Church. And this icon was so beloved by the Tsars that it was taken from Kursk to Moscow by Tsar Ivan the Terrible. He's called Ivan the Terrible. It's a bad translation of the name, but that's the way he's known. And he had his iconographers or artists add these saints to the icon around the middle, around the original icon. These are all, the saints here are all Old Testament prophets. These are people who lived before the birth of Christ, and they all, if we read their books in the Old Testament, which is the first part of the Bible, all of these prophets foretold the birth of Christ, the coming of the Mother of God. So all of these saints prophesied or foretold the coming of God and the role that the Mother of God would play. So the icon was in Moscow for a while, and then it came back to the city of Kursk. And in 1812, when the French Emperor Napoleon invaded Russia, the famous Russian General Kutuzov, before the big battle at Borodino, General Kutuzov requested this icon be brought to the battlefield before the battle was fought, so that the Russian soldiers could pray before the icon. This icon was brought, and another very famous Russian icon, the Smolensk Mother of God, was also brought. So this icon brought a lot of comfort to the soldiers. They gave them faith that they would defeat the enemy. And sure enough, they were defeated, and Napoleon left Russia. This icon has worked many, many miracles. Now again, I'm not talking about this copy, although this copy may have done miracles too that we don't know about, because every icon potentially is a miraculous icon. But this particular icon also helped a little boy who became very famous in Russian church history. His name was Saint Seraphim of Sarov, Святой Seraphim Sarovsky. He's the saint that you see right behind you, the big icon right there hanging on the wall. That's Saint Seraphim. He was born and grew up in Kursk, the hometown of this icon. When he was a little boy, he became very ill, and his parents were worried that he might die. He had such a terrible illness. And this icon was often brought through the city in procession, all right? And the parents of Saint Seraphim of Sarov requested that the icon be brought to his home where he was lying in bed and sick. And the icon was taken over his bed by people. It was passed over his bed, and he was healed. And he became one of the greatest saints Russia ever knew. He lived in the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century. He died in 1833. This icon worked many miracles in Russia. And when the revolution happened in Russia in 1917, it was followed by a civil war. That often happens when there's a revolution. The society becomes separated into two parts. This icon during the Civil War was taken out from Russia to Europe by the Bishop of Kursk, because when the Civil War ended, hundreds of thousands of Russians left Russia because they were afraid to fall into the hands of the communists. The communists were bad people. They declared war against religion, against God. And the Russian people who left, immigrated to the West, took this icon with them. And this icon has been with us, Russian, Americans, Europeans, since that time. More than, almost 100 years now. In 2007, that was, 11 years ago, 10 years ago, the Russian church came back together again after all these years of separation. And because of that coming together, this icon has been going back to Russia every year to bring comfort to the Russian people. But this icon has become such a part of the Russian emigration, of the Russians who live in the West, that it is also called sometimes the indicator of the way of the Russian people in the West. In Russian we say the путеводительница, right? So for us Russians who don't live in Russia, this icon is very, very special. And God willing, it will be with us forever. Although the icon is always traveling. It goes to Russia, it goes to Europe, goes to Australia. And we here in Washington are very lucky, because every November, on Thanksgiving Day, the icon comes here, and we are able to have it for a whole week So people can come to church, pray before this icon. We are able to take the icon to the sick people, to hospitals, and pray for miracles, pray for the healing. But most importantly, this icon, the miracle that this icon works is a spiritual miracle. It brings people closer to God, which is more important than anything else, because we're all going to die, right? No one likes to think about that, but we have to think about that, because we have a soul which will remain, which will leave our bodies and remain forever. And the main goal of our lives should be the salvation of our souls, that we enter into union with God one day. And the Mother of God helps us, because she's a mother to all of us. You know, we know how much our own mothers care, but you can just imagine the Mother of God cares for us 1,000 times more than our own mothers care about us, if I can compare it. So, but this is a copy of the icon, and we keep it in our church here all the time to remind people of how much she helped the Russians who now live in America. Any more questions?
Yes. Why did the case have to be like blue? Why couldn't it be like green or red or golden?
Well, because tradition tells us that the favorite color of the Mother of God was blue. And when we celebrate feasts of the Mother of God, holidays that are dedicated to the Mother of God, the priests, the altar servers, and all the vestments in the church are in blue to remind us of her fondness for blue. Also, blue reminds us of heaven. When we look up in the sky, we imagine that heaven is up there, right? So, but this icon also has other covers which are never used. But this is the one that it wears on a daily basis. And for those who are listening to us and interested, this is all solid silver, covered with enamel. It's a very beautiful workmanship. The riza was made by famous Russian jewelers in the 19th century, or maybe the beginning of the 20th century.
So I see how the icon is made, but why did it have to have the specific saints? It could have had like only the angels.
Well, as I explained earlier, these specific saints are important because they foretold the coming of Christ. They prophesied. And they also prophesied about the Mother of God. So a person who is very interested, acutely interested in the history of Christianity, the Church, will be maybe moved to read their prophecies, to help support their faith in Christ and His Holy Mother. Okay?
So if I were right now to come and kiss the original or see the original icon or this one, which place would it be the best to kiss it?
Anywhere except the face of the Mother of God or the face of Christ. Because whenever we come up to an icon, we always avoid kissing the faces. We just kiss somewhere to the side. Because kissing an icon is not the same thing as when we kiss Mama or someone who is close to us. It's a different kind of expression. Kissing is a very intimate thing. It's a very intimate act. And because they are pure and holy, we try to avoid kissing the face of the saints or of Christ or the Mother of God.
So...
Out of humility.
Yeah. So... why on earth had it been like this? Couldn't they have been wearing other colors, like she could be wearing blue, completely blue?
Well, many icons depict Mother of God in blue, others depict her in red. There's no particular reason for that. This icon, if you took the cover off, you would see that she's dressed in the same dark outfit, which depicts her earthly existence. She lived on earth. The blue, as I said, depicts her heavenly side. But that's not the most important thing, of course. The most important thing is that she is depicted always with a very serene face, a very calm, collected, very regal, because she's the Queen of Heaven, after all.
Why are her hands like that? Why can't they be like this or like any other position?
Well, because this position is a position of prayer. She's raising her hands, and also she's enveloping with her hands, with her arms, the Christ child. The Christ child is in front of her, but his position is like he's coming out of her womb, in a sense. She gave birth to him, so he's right now depicted as part of her, and he's depicted as a very young child here. But this is a position of prayer. If you've been to church recently, you've probably noticed the priest sometimes raises his hands like this in front of the altar table. And he says, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill among men." And then he crosses himself, and then he raises his hands again. So it's a position of prayer. Sometimes you see in the iconostas, the Mother of God is standing up, and she's pointing. She's also holding her hands upright, but she's pointing to her Son. Right there, you see? To the right, to our left of Christ in the middle.
Yes.
Up there. So different icons depict her in different positions.
So I know they could be holding anything else, but it's just very curious. Why are they all holding a piece of paper?
Because that shows that they all wrote something during their lifetime. And as I mentioned, they prophesied. They wrote down prophecies, which were entered into books, the books of the prophets in the Bible. And here is Saint David, the king of Israel and the prophet. He wrote Psalms, and the Psalms contain many, many prophecies about Christ and the Mother of God. This is the holy prophet King Solomon, who also prophesied much in the Old Testament. Daniel, Jeremiah, Elias, Avacumas, Gideon, Isaiah, Moses. So all these were great men who lived hundreds of years before Christ came. And they all wrote down very precisely what Christ would be, who he would be, what he would do. For example, Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah is sometimes called the Old Testament evangelist because he wrote down in great detail the sufferings that Christ would endure for our sake. It's very interesting. When you go home, take down from the shelf the Bible and look up the prophecies. Look up the books of the prophets, and you'll see. Or you can go to Google and go to Wikipedia, and you can look up their names: Isaiah, David, Jeremiah, and you'll get in little concise form the essence of what they wrote. It's very interesting.
Very interesting indeed. So I see like the entire icon, but I don't get why is that right there. It could be here, here, or even like right under here.
Well, because this little medallion, if it were here, it would block the writing here. But what that is, there was a famous iconographer, his name was Father Cyprian, who died about 10 years ago. He lived in Jordanville, and he was once asked to look and inspect the icon underneath the metal frame. And what Father Cyprian did was he took, what old icons, they become dark over time because of dust and oil and just time. It weathers the icon. So what he did was he took the metal cover off, and he noticed that the icon was very dark. So he took cotton, made a solution, and cleaned the icon. All right? And part of the cotton that he used to clean the icon is inside that little medallion. It was given to us by a young man. I mean, he's not young anymore, but he remembers when Father Cyprian did that. And he was given a piece of that cotton containing the dirt from the top of the icon, from the surface of the icon, and just as a keepsake. And the dirt from the surface of the icon was, of course, hundreds of years old. So he kept this in this little medallion, and then he just decided that when we bought this icon, he says, well, why don't you keep it as a reminder of what Father Cyprian did, cleaning the icon. That's all.
Very, very pretty too. I see all the saints, but why is there a box right here?
That depicts the altar of heaven, God's throne. And it reminds us of the throne that we have in our altar, where the Holy Eucharist is performed. But this is considered like a depiction of the throne of the Lord of Glory. And of course there you see the book, which reminds us of the Holy Gospel, the teaching of Christ, his life and teaching.
Very pretty, and I like this story. Why are there this specific kind of flower? It could be rose, or it could be sunflower. So why is it this specific flower?
You mean this?
Yes.
Well, what that reminds us of is the prophets were all spiritually connected one to another. This is like a piece of, like a vineyard, like the vines that intermingle, and all of these prophets were spiritually one because they all focused in their prophecies on the coming of Christ. All right? So those vines show that this interconnection between the prophets.
Very cool. What is this space back here?
What is it? We're here?
Right here. What is that? What's inside?
This here?
Mm-hmm.
Those are nails that remind us that Christ was nailed to the cross, that he suffered for us. And his suffering made everything possible for us, spiritually speaking. He died for our sins. He died so that we could be forgiven. And always when we see nails, that's to remind us of the suffering that Christ endured for our sake.
Wow.
It must be raining.
Yeah. Thank you for being here with me today.
Sweetheart, thank you for taking so much interest in the Kursk icon. And I hope and pray that you and I together will pray before it when it comes to us in November on Thanksgiving. All right?
Right.
God bless you.